Just over 200 kilometers from Washington, D.C., behind a ring of lethal razor wire, stands one of the most secure prisons in the world. Hundreds of cameras, bulletproof cells that lock without keys, and an arsenal of weapons to contain the prisoners.
Step up.
This is North Branch Correctional Institution, a masterpiece of prison design. North Branch owes its existence to a series of landmark lockups. At the heart of each lies a breakthrough in prison design that made each jail harder to escape from than the last. One by one, traveling up the scale, we'll reveal the incredible stories behind these structures and the inventions that have allowed prisons to evolve. 4 ingenious leaps forward that have made prisons safer, tougher, and bigger. North Branch Correctional Institution is a maximum security prison. And it has to be. Over 900 of its 1,400 inmates are convicted killers. To keep them locked up and safe from each other, North Branch is brimming with technology.
Stand up.
Body scanning machines, unbreakable cells, and powerful non-lethal weapons, all designed to give officers the edge in the daily cat-and-mouse game with the prisoners.
If you worked in prisons as long as I have, you never say never. It's little simple things that you don't think about, that you put your guard down, they're gonna beat you.
To understand how North Branch can keep so many violent offenders under lock and key, we need to travel back in time. In 12th century England, the king wants to build a fortress that doesn't just keep his enemies out, but also keeps his prisoners securely locked inside. When William the Conqueror invades England in 1066, he builds a mighty fortress in the middle of London, the Great Tower. It is the biggest building in the capital, designed to keep the king safe and show the English who's boss.
The tower was really built to overawe the Londoners and to impress William's power on them. But it was also used, as many castles were, as a prison.
Through the ages, the tower has held some of history's most famous prisoners: Anne Boleyn, Sir Walter Raleigh, and the princes in the tower. But as formidable as the tower looks today, it wasn't always so. In the 11th century, there's only the Great Tower in the center to hold the prisoners. It's surrounded by the massive Roman city walls and a ditch behind a wooden wall called a palisade. In 1100, the Great Tower receives its first prisoner, Ranulph Flambard, arrested for extortion. But he doesn't plan to stay for very long.
Ranulph Flambard was Bishop of Durham, and he was a very important minister, essentially, under King William Rufus. And we know he was brought here in September 1100, but by February the following year, he's planned his escape.
Flambard's plan is to outwit his guards.
The conditions for prisoners, as far as we can tell with Flambard, would be pretty good, because part of his escape plan is the fact that he's able to bring in a whole feast for his guards. It seems that he drank them under the table. When they were drunk and snoring, as the Chronicle says, he then went to the barrel of wine, which had a rope hidden inside it, took the rope out, attached it to the window bar, and climbed down the outside of the tower and escaped.
As soon as Flambard overcomes the walls of the Great Tower, only a low wooden wall stands between him and a life of freedom. The breakout exposes a major weakness in the tower's security.
There was only one layer of defence at that point. Really, there was just a sort of ditch that would have filled with water and a wooden palisade. So he didn't have to go through many layers to get out.
The tower stays like this for many years until King Richard the Lionheart decides to boost its defenses. He replaces the wooden palisade with a mighty stone wall. Around it, he digs out a moat and floods it with water from the River Thames. But the Thames is tidal, so the moat keeps draining away. It takes another 100 years and the help of a Dutchman to solve this plumbing problem once and for all. The answer comes from an unexpected place: canals.
We know this moat was built by a specialist brought in from Flanders, a man called Walter. And we know at this stage that he does use technology to keep water in the moat. We know that he has sluice gates at either end of the moat. So a bit like a lock on a canal, it's designed to hold the water. I mean, the Thames is incredibly tidal here.
The king builds yet another wall and widens the moat. Then his Dutch engineer puts sluice gates into the outer wall. When the tide comes in, gatekeepers open the sluices to fill up the moat and then close them again to trap the water inside.
And this is the moat that still survives today. It's about 50 metres across, and at the time would have been about 15 metres deep. So really serious defence.
The massive moat seals the tower's reputation as an impregnable fortress and an inescapable prison. Together with the mighty walls, it's kept thousands of prisoners safely locked up through the centuries, right up until 1941. The tower's concept of multiple layers of defense still influences the design of prisons today. North Branch takes this idea to the extreme. Prisoners here have all the time in the world to contemplate life on the other side of the fence. But there are so many hurdles to overcome that the chance of escape is remote. First of all, the correctional officers, or COs, are not as easily fooled as Flambard's drunken tower guards.
We're gonna cuff the inmate. Sir, step up, step to the door.
Open Charlie 44.
Be honest, we trust no one. We have to make sure inmates do not get disguises of visitors or take staff uniform and try to walk out the front door.
Face the wall. Just gonna pat you down real quick before we put you back in the cell, please.
A lot of times it's staff negligence, and that's why we have to keep our staff on their toes. You don't take anything for granted.
Okay, step in the cell, sir.
Dino Pantases is serving a life sentence for having his wife killed.
I don't see where anyone can plan on escaping this institution. This institution is very secure. I work in the grounds unit. When you're out there on a hot summer day and you look up, you see a shotgun sticking out of the tower. They take security seriously around here.
Any prisoner pondering escape faces a barrage of physical obstacles. The Tower of London had 4 layers of defense. North Branch has 7. Its cells are made from extremely tough concrete. They're cemented into a cell block controlled by CCTV. All the cell blocks are identical to confuse prisoners. The large open space around the blocks is monitored by guards in watchtowers. The first perimeter fence is 4 meters tall and has microwave sensors that automatically trigger searchlights. Beyond this sits the ultimate escape barrier, the outer fence, which is covered with a special type of wire that has razor-sharp edges. Engineer Jem Stansfield is about to tackle a small section of this simple but effective barrier.
This is my razor wire moat. Now it's made up of coils of high tensile steel wire, and onto those coils are fixed punched out razor sharp barbs. It's exceptionally difficult to get through. Now I'm going to have a go, see how far I can get, to give us an idea of just how it does what it does. Immediately you feel like the tension in the wires is stopping you getting anywhere. And what... I'm now properly stuck. The way this stuff grips into my clothes is such that I can't go forwards and I can't go backwards. And it's because of the shape of these barbs. Now, a well-tooled up prisoner may have some kind of wire cutters. The thing is with razor wire, it has a reputation because of the tension in that high tensile steel of pinging where you don't expect it if you try and cut it. I'm slightly nervous. Ooh, ah. Right, that's got my arm now. That's actually quite a struggle to get that out. I'm going to give up. I don't want to go any further. If I persevere, which I can do, it's only going to cause me more physical damage. I've got some animal skin here. Now, if I were to push it in here, it gets stuck on these barbs in such a way that the more you struggle, the more it bites in. And it gets to a point where to get out, you have to rip a hole in yourself.
North Branch Correctional Institution is surrounded by row upon row of razor wire. The warden here knows its value from an escape attempt at another prison.
Well, I've had to pull an inmate out of the wire because he tried to escape. He got cut up pretty bad. We had to wear leather welder's outfit to go in to keep us from getting cut.
It is nearly impossible to breach all 7 barriers at North Branch.
Every inmate's probably thought about escaping, but it's the furthest thing from my mind. The easiest way to get out of prison is through the court system.
Back in 1300, the Tower of London shows that many layers of fortification make a prison more secure. But as prisons grow bigger, it gets harder to monitor the inmates. To build the biggest prison in America, architects must separate the prisoners, but keep an eye on every single one of them. In 1829, social reformers in Philadelphia build the biggest prison of its day, Eastern State Penitentiary. It's based on a revolutionary idea.
They believed the secret of making a person remorseful, penitent, was to lock them away from society and give them time to look into their hearts. So this new philosophy led to a new word, a penitentiary, a place to make someone look into their heart and become truly remorseful.
At the time, Eastern State is a technological wonder. Every cell has running water, central heating, and flush toilets. Luxuries that not even the president can enjoy at the White House.
So here we are in a typical Eastern States cell. It's about 8 feet wide, about 12 feet deep. It's got a 12-foot barrel-vaulted ceiling with a skylight, which were meant to bring down the light of God, almost like a monastery with an inmate living in silence and contemplation. They were going to eat in the cell, sleep in the cell, work in the cell, worship in the cell. This was their entire world.
The concept of isolating prisoners like this is groundbreaking. Before Eastern State, most prisons crowd all the inmates, men, women, and children, together under one roof. These jails are overcrowded, dirty, and a breeding ground for crime. In the 18th century, architects start thinking about ways to solve this problem. English philosopher Jeremy Bentham comes up with a clever idea. He knows that holding lots of prisoners in a single space is a recipe for trouble. But locked away in separate cells, prisoners are hard to watch. Bentham arranges the cells in a circle and stacks them in layers. He puts a watchtower in the middle so a single guard can see into every cell. Only, to make this prison bigger, it has to either grow unfeasibly wide or impossibly tall. The legacy of Bentham's idea lives on at Eastern State. Its layout is so clever that just a few guards can monitor hundreds of prisoners with ease. They're still the central hub of Bentham's design. But the cells are arranged in long arms radiating out from the center. There's one guard in the middle and one patrolling each of the corridors. Thanks to this radial design, a handful of guards can watch over hundreds of prisoners, who can never be sure when they're being watched.
This was the 1820s version of like a video surveillance system. The central surveillance hub in the middle of the building and surrounded by radiating spokes, like a wheel. So a single officer could turn on his heel and see down all the 7 corridors.
In this prison, there is nowhere to hide. The cells even have holes in the ceiling for the ever-watchful eye of God. Eastern State becomes the most famous prison on the planet. 300 prisons all over the world copy its design that makes surveillance so easy. When it closes down after 142 years, it's held over 75,000 prisoners. North Branch Correctional Institution takes the idea of surveillance to the extreme. There are no cameras in the cells here, but the rest of the prison is closely guarded by CCTV.
I feel that this institution is very safe. I came from another institution where when you take a shower, you watch yourself. And this institution, if there isn't a CO watching you, there is a camera watching you.
When it comes to surveillance, North Branch has got it covered. But the cameras don't see everything.
Yeah, I always say if you take an inmate with no clothes on, throw him out of an airplane, when he hits the ground, he'll have a weapon. It's just amazing how they conceal it.
You can remove your hands from the wall.
Smuggled contraband is a massive problem, even in a high-tech prison. So at North Branch, prisoners must face the boss.
This is the boss chair, body orifice security scanner. Scans the body for any kind of metal. Go around to the front of the machine. Step up and carefully turn around. Take a seat. Do you have any metal on you? Yes, sir. All right, we have a watch. Anything else? No, sir. All right, try again. Turn around and again, have a seat. Make sure your back is...
We've removed an enormous amount of contraband from these institutions. Every single drug stash or cell phone that we take out of these institutions represents an officer going home at the end of his shift, safe and sound, because the violence that's perpetrated on behalf of this contraband is intense.
This is the special squad that fights one of the most lethal weapons in a prisoner's arsenal. The mobile phone.
Cell phones are extremely dangerous inside of a prison. The cell phones allow them to circumnavigate the security system and arrange drops of narcotics. They can even arrange hits against the witnesses against them, and also correctional staff. They can arrange to try to hurt them as well on the outside. To you and I, a cell phone has no smell. To a dog, it has a multiple composite smell, which in the dog's brain, we have trained them to associate that composite smell with their toy. The dog's natural instinct is to hunt and find things, so he actually thinks he's trying to find his toy.
Good girl. Good girl. Good boy. Baby. Cell phone. Motorola cell phone. Good job. No SIM card? No SIM card. Good enough. Good job. You got it.
Whereas a correctional officer would have to spend hours and hours searching for this contraband, the dog can localize it to a very small area very quickly. So in that regard, he's worth 20 or 30 correctional officers, just one single dog. All right, cell 44.
Last year, the K9 unit at North Branch flushed out 269 phones.
Good boy, good boy, good boy, Tazzy, good boy, Tazzy.
Well, we had one inmate that had 2 cell phones and a charger up his rear. We cannot go take it from him, but we can put him in a cell until he gives it to us, which means he's isolated, and he'll eventually get tired of it being in that location and give up, because we know we're going to get it one way or the other.
In 1829, Eastern State Penitentiary shows that tight surveillance is the key to building big prisons. But as prisoners become ever more ingenious, simply watching them is not enough. Engineers building Alcatraz, the world's most secure prison, have to make sure that its cells are totally escape-proof. In the 1930s, America is hit by a wave of organized crime. The FBI spends many years trying to catch and convict mobsters like Al Capone. When they finally arrest him, they must make sure he stays locked up. To contain this new breed of super gangster, the US government plans to build a super prison. They find the perfect location, an island in the middle of San Francisco Bay called Alcatraz. On the island is an old military fort sitting in a deep pit cut into the rock. Workers demolish the old building and build 3 stories of steel reinforced concrete cell blocks on top. None of the 600 cells has any contact to the outer walls. They're a prison within a prison. Each cell is fitted with unbreakable steel gates, which have no keys, but can be operated remotely. Alcatraz is the biggest concrete structure in the world, and supposedly the most secure prison on the planet. Bob Luke arrives in Alcatraz in 1954, looking forward to 12 years on the rock.
The boat made a wide turn, and then I could see the island. And first I saw the houses down the bottom, and then looked up and the prison was sitting up on top of the island. So that was my first glimpse of Alcatraz. It looked like to me like a French chateau, but I knew that this was no country home. This was going to be my prison for several years. Of course, we all had heard of Alcatraz. It was going to be the end of the line.
Alcatraz is the last stop for America's most dangerous and violent offenders.
This is my mug shot that was taken the first day I got here in April 1954. It was just a young thug that beat you up just as soon as look at you, hold up banks. I was a burglar, car thief, served 11 or 12 years in prison for all that. So I was a different guy.
To keep people like young Bob safely locked up, engineers fit the cell doors with an extremely tough kind of prison bar.
When they opened the prison up in 1934, these all were done over with tool steels. You can't cut these bars, even if you had a hacksaw blade. They're impossible. There's a heavy, hardened tool steel inside this bar. I used to come in at 12 o'clock at midnight and walk these tiers counting, and I always felt fairly safe, you know.
The doors aren't just unbreakable, they lock without keys. They give a whole new meaning to the term, the slammer.
We've got 13 doors that we can open from this one box. And the officer would yell down the row here, rack 'em, just giving them a heads up that the doors are going to be closing. That's where you get the true sound of the slammer. Rack 'em! And this is part of the punishments of Alcatraz here in this door. Open and close every day.
Well, the first time you hear that door slam, it's like being entombed. You know, you just know that this is going to be it for a while.
Right 'em!
Alcatraz looks like the perfect prison, a concrete fortress brimming with technology. It doesn't even need a fence around it, as it's surrounded by the icy currents of San Francisco Bay.
When I used to work the towers, I used to see logs maybe 8, 9 feet long going out with the tide as if it had an outboard motor on it. Out it would go.
Oh, sure, I wanted to try to escape from anywhere, but I always thought it was impossible to try here. So I just give up even, thinking about it.
Despite all the technology at Alcatraz, 3 inmates go missing in 1962. All that's left of them are 3 dummies made of soap, toilet paper, and hair stolen from the barbershop. And of course, the big holes they've scraped into the concrete walls of their cells with a spoon.
The cells are back to back with a corridor in between, nothing but pipes. They crawl right up to the top. And once they got up there, they can't be seen. It must have took a year or 2 years of continuous planning. Kind of amazing how that was allowed to happen.
Despite a massive search operation, there's no trace of the prisoners.
I don't believe anyone ever escaped from Alcatraz. Most people don't realize the closest these inmates ever got to water was to take a shower. Now you could imagine panic-stricken 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, jumping into that bay. No way. My impression is that if they got into the water, they may have got out 100 yards or so and then goodbye.
Whether the men escaped or not, the fate of Alcatraz is sealed. An investigation reveals that the supposedly escape-proof concrete is to blame for the breakout. Alcatraz uses seawater to flush the toilets. It trickles from leaky pipes and seeps into the walls. Brick chips in the concrete soak up the water and swell like sponges, wedging open fissures in the walls. Eventually, the reinforcing steel bars expand as they rust and crack the concrete even more. After 30 years, the formerly super strong walls are so crumbly that they're not even a match for a spoon. The leaky concrete would cost millions to repair. So in 1963, Alcatraz closes its doors for the last time. But the lessons from the rock live on. North Branch still uses concrete cells, but they're made from an extremely durable type of concrete. Each cell is built in a factory in Pennsylvania. The whole cell is cast as a single piece of concrete to make sure it's flawless.
Well, for North Branch, we produced 508 double modules. Each double weighs approximately 25 tons.
Inside the cell walls is a cage of tightly spaced steel wire.
The steel is placed in a grid. It serves the purpose of reinforcing the concrete, but it also serves as a security barrier so that the inmates aren't able to tunnel through the concrete.
Workers place the steel cage into a mold. And then they pour in a secret concrete mixture designed to make the cells super strong. It looks like a simple job, but the workers have to be careful not to introduce any flaws into the cell walls.
So you got to keep the concrete coming up even on both sides.
As the concrete hardens, workers draw samples and cast them into cylinders. Then they test them to destruction.
This concrete's probably twice as strong as what people have in their driveways at home.
This machine puts pressure on the concrete until it cracks. It must survive over 3,000 tons per square meter.
You can see in the cylinder a little bit of failure right here. It didn't crush everything through. This is still capable of withstanding at least that much force again.
And even the parts that are not made of concrete are super tough.
The door frames and the window frames are actually cast with the module, and they're virtually impossible to remove. The glass that goes inside the window frames is extremely thick and able to resist impacts by hammers, by gunshots, by whatever the prisoner could even think to throw at it. The bolts that we use to attach the fixtures can't be removed by normal tools. In some cases, the head of the bolt actually breaks off by design. In other cases, the security fasteners use a special head design that can't be purchased by people off the street. No one has ever escaped from any of our cells. To date, our cells are escape-proof. Why do I feel like I just jinxed ourselves?
The cells are shipped from the factory to the prison and assembled into a seamless cell block. Thick steel doors close the only remaining gap. All the pipes and wires run through the concrete wall into a small void in the corner called the pipe chase. Even if a prisoner could break through the concrete into the pipe chase, he'd be no closer to escaping.
All right, this is the pipe chase leading to the toilet and the sink areas. It doesn't go anywhere. It's concreted off at the top and concreted off at the bottom. If the sink were to be pulled off of the wall, there's a rebarb through the concrete right there, and there is nowhere to go. If they were to get into the pipe chase, they're in the pipe chase. They can't go anywhere.
The cells in North Branch don't need CCTV inside them because they're totally tamper-proof.
What we have here is one of the cells that we use to house inmates. Typically, they're double bunk cells like the one that you see here. Right here, we have a sink and the toilet combination. Also above it, you can see we have a sprinkler system in case somebody tries to catch something on fire. Most of the stuff that's in here is non-flammable. The stuff that is flammable, it's not going to burn anywhere but itself because there's no other fuel sources for it. We have a clear plastic television. They can't really hide anything in there. If they take it apart, we can kind of see where they took pieces out of it. Most electronics in here are clear plastic, so they can't take pieces out, use the metal as a weapon, or store a weapon, drugs, anything of the sort in there. Everything has a security rivet. You can't just fashion a type of screwdriver or some sort to get in there. You'd have to really be good at what you're doing to get a security screw off.
Back in 1934, Alcatraz shows that without strong cells, a prison can never be escape-proof. But in the final stage of prison evolution, there is a surprising problem to overcome. To keep their sanity, prisoners in North Branch need a certain degree of freedom, but that will make them harder to control. February the 23rd, 2000. This CCTV camera captures one of the worst incidents in the history of American prisons. Inmates at Pelican Bay State Prison are taking their morning exercise in the prison yard. All of a sudden, Latino gang members attack black inmates with improvised knives and razor blades. Officers try to subdue the rioters, but are outnumbered 20-1. The guards in the watchtowers start firing live ammunition. When the fog clears, one inmate is dead and 16 others injured. One way to avoid incidents like this is by locking prisoners in their cells round the clock. But spending their lives in solitary confinement will mess up the mind of even the most hardened criminal.
In this prison, we have open movement. We'll have periods of time during the day where inmates will move in mass numbers. We do that so we can move inmates to different opportunities. Some people believe a man without hope is a very dangerous man. And if you think about living in a kind of a deprived environment, any little thing that you can get sometimes is very motivating.
But more freedom brings more danger. A third of all prisoners at North Branch are members of a gang. And more time together inevitably means more trouble.
Two grown men don't agree on something, they fight. These are individuals that don't make the best judgment sometimes. And if they got a choice between fight and flight, sometimes they like to fight.
North Branch is designed to deal with trouble at every level. Its control tower is totally isolated from the cell blocks. And the cell blocks are far away from one another. This way, the control tower can lock them down individually and then call in the cavalry.
Yeah, if inmates have weapons when we're trying to do an extraction, you feel safe with all the Kevlar. If I'm going to be on the ground rolling around, my knees, my ankles are protected with the different gear I have on. Razor blades, needle sticks, I have gloves, a lot of protection. A gas mask for chemical agents. Feel pretty safe.
A lot of times when we do an extraction, we get medical approval to use pepper spray,
And to protect our officers from that so they also don't have to inhale it, we put on these type of gas masks as a protective barrier. And in the last piece that Sergeant Smith would put on would be a tactical helmet. Protects the face. It also protects if the inmate's spitting, if he's throwing urine and feces. It also protects the officer's face and other areas. Anytime I have to use any force that is planned as compared to spontaneous, they'll have this gear on.
But even when the officers play hardball, they never dress to kill.
37, 38 years in prisons, we never carried guns. It's just not a good practice because guns can be taken away from you. Some people are lucky and don't get killed when they get shot, but the majority of people get killed. It's not Hollywood.
This factory makes weapons for North Branch Correctional Institution. Weapons that are designed not to kill. Rubber bullets give rioters something to think about. And if there's a whole crowd to deal with, tear gas is an old favorite. Used since the days of Alcatraz. One of the most effective weapons to subdue an inmate is the taser.
This is the flagship device used in law enforcement today. It's called the Taser X26. It's an electronic control device that delivers an electrical signal to the body. It causes your nervous system to issue contract commands to your muscles, completely immobilizing you as a target. It's really the only tool available to the officer that provides a level of control that's similar to a lethal device, but in a reversible manner. Taser, taser, taser! You're doing good. You're doing good. You're almost there. Okay, go ahead and lay him down.
They're now going to lay him down to the floor. I want to maintain my distance in case he becomes unruly again. The officer is going to apply the cuffs on the individual, gain compliance.
Get these probes out of here. Ooh, jeez.
It wasn't tremendously painful, actually. Just awkward, like, because you were just stiff as a board, you know.
Is there any way that you could have fought them?
Absolutely not. You're just completely locked up.
Tasers are extremely powerful, but they only have a single shot. The weapon of choice at North Branch is a spray made from chili peppers.
Each officer, as just a regular item that they carry with them all the time, every day, is a can of pepper spray. It's good for a confrontation with just one individual, but it also has enough volume that you can affect several people if you need to.
Even the weakest version of this spray is 10 times hotter than Tabasco sauce.
Okay, I need to go to the water.
It effectively blinds the target, making them easy to overpower.
It burns. I'm peeling my eyes open so that I can decontaminate them. It's involuntary closure of the eyes. You can't keep your eyes open if you get the spray right into the eyes. I think it would be significantly worse than chopping chilies. So I'll say chopping chilies times 100. My whole face is like starting to burn though. I think I'll stay here for a long time.
At North Branch, the pepper spray comes into its own in 2010 when inmates start a riot on New Year's Eve. Using their pepper spray, the officers manage to control the situation, and nobody gets killed.
Only thing I can promise you is when you leave here, hopefully you leave alive. I cannot change the aging process, so you're going to be older, but hopefully be alive. And majority of us like to live. Even if it's in prison, it's still you try to make the best you got.
North Branch Correctional Institution is at the cutting edge of prison design. Its formidable fortifications, surveillance systems, and escape-proof cells make it one of the most secure prisons in the world. To date, no one has escaped from North Branch. But the inmates here will keep trying. One day, one of them may succeed, and this prison will make way for a stronger and even bigger one.
Meet the Doctor of Death in our brand new Crimes That Changed History season tomorrow at 9. Stay tuned for Scotland's most evil murderer.